Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kendra and today I'll be doing my top 10 books of 2020. This was a very hard list to narrow down because I read so many good books this year, but I did end up narrowing it down to 10 and these are going to be in no particular order. So the first book that I want to talk about is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier, and this one is about Marion and Derek. Their son goes missing and it's been about a year and their son still hasn't been found, so she ends up hiring a private investigator, and the private investigator ended up finding some secrets and it basically will destroy their marriage. So this book was so good. I love domestic thrillers and this one really was amazing. There was a lot of twists and turns I did not see coming, and usually in a thriller I'll rate it super high if I have no idea what the twists are, and I had no clue in this one. So if you like domestic thrillers, I highly recommend picking this one up. The next book that I want to talk about is The Flight Girls by Noelle Salazar, and this was one of our buddy reads that I do with Shelby at Shelby Tiger Reads and Nicole at the Girly Girl Bookworm, and I'm pretty sure we read this one in January and this book has stuck with me since, so that definitely tells you something. But this one is set in World War II and you're following this girl named Audrey. She loves to fly, so she ends up going to Hawaii. She is there to help train Army pilots. So while she's there, she meets this guy named Lieutenant James Hart, and they end up becoming really good friends. And while Audrey is in Hawaii in 1941, that is when Pearl Harbor gets hit, and she's actually in the sky when that happened, so it really put an effect on her. So she ends up going home, and after some time she decides that she wants to fly again, so she ends up signing up for the Women's Air Force Service Program, and she learns to love to fly again. So while she's there, she's writing back and forth to Lieutenant James Hart because he is in Europe on duty for the military, and one day she gets notification that he is MIA. His plane went down and he's missing. So this book was absolutely amazing. I really loved how this one was set in the United States during World War II, because usually with World War II books it's usually set in like Europe somewhere, so I really loved that about this book. And I've never knew about the women's Army service pilots before, so I found that super fascinating and I definitely wanted to learn more about it. And I think that's really why I love historical fiction so much, is because you learn about things that you never would typically learn about in school. So this book was so amazing. If you love historical fiction set in World War II about pilots, women pilots, I highly recommend picking this one up, and the romance in this book is absolutely adorable as well, so highly recommend this one. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. This is another historical fiction World War II, and this is about Alice. She is a mother and her son is autistic and he's nonverbal, so he uses this app to help communicate with her. So while Alice is dealing with learning how to communicate with her son, her grandmother ends up having a stroke and she goes into the hospital. So when she gets to the hospital, she finds out now that her grandmother cannot talk, and the app that she uses with her son, she can now use with her grandmother so they communicate with each other. Well, her grandmother really wants her to go to Poland because that is where she's from, but she cannot figure out why she wants her to go to Poland so bad. So Alice must decide if she is going to go to Poland or not for her grandmother. So that is one timeline, which is in the present, and then you're also following another timeline during World War II in 1938, and you're following a girl named Elena. She's engaged to Thomas, and he is becoming a medical doctor, and while he is at school, the Nazis end up invading Poland and her town. So Thomas is trying to get back with Elena, and when she finally finds him, he is actually secretly hiding Jews, so she must meet him only in secret so she doesn't get in trouble as well. So she ends up going to this camp to hopefully flee Poland to get away from the Nazis. So this book was another amazing book. I love books that have a grandma or a grandpa in them. It just, I don't know, I just love that about them. I don't know, I just love it. So anytime there's a grandma or grandpa in a book, I love so much. So there's that aspect of why I love this book. And I also love that there was a couple mystery elements in this book, which was very fun to read about as well. This is a pretty thick historical fiction, and it did not feel like you're reading a super thick book at all. It read pretty quickly, and I also loved both of the dual timelines. A lot of times I don't like one or the other. I usually like one more than the other. So this one, I loved both of them, and I was super intrigued throughout the whole entire book, and this one was just so good. I highly recommend this one if you love historical fiction during World War II. The next book that I want to talk about is Summer of '69 by Ellen Hildebrand, and this is another historical fiction, and this one is set in 1969, as you can see. And you're following this family, and they all usually go to Nantucket to spend the summer at their grandmother's house. However, this year, a lot of the kids, they are just in different places in their lives, so some are staying in different places instead of all going to Nantucket. So yeah, you're just basically following all these characters in the summer in Nantucket, and it's really, really good. This is a family drama if you like family dramas. And then also, this book is obviously a historical fiction, but it definitely reads like a contemporary. So if you're not really a big fan of historical fiction, but you like contemporary, this one is definitely a good one to pick up. So this one was really good, and I'm excited to read more from Ellen Hildebrand. Next book that I want to talk about is No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a thriller, and this is about Darby. She is on her way to the hospital to see her mom before she goes into surgery, and on the way there she gets stuck in a blizzard. So she stops off at a rest stop, and when she gets out of the car, she sees this little girl in a crate in a van that's parked beside her, and now she's stuck at a rest stop with a kidnapper. So this book will definitely make your stomach turn, and it'll definitely make you never want to go to a rest stop alone ever again in your life. So this book was so fantastic. If you like psychological thrillers, and this one is also fast-paced, so if you like those, highly recommend picking this one up. And it's set during the winter time, which is perfect for this time. The next book that I'll talk about is The Guest List by Lucy Foley, and this is set in a remote island off of the coast of Ireland, and Jules and Will are about to get married. And each member of the wedding party has dark secrets, and you're trying to figure out who got murdered and who did it. So this book, I actually had no intentions of picking up. I actually didn't even pick it for my book of the month pick for that month. And because it just didn't, I don't know, it didn't really appeal to me. And then all these reviews started coming in like, this book is amazing. So I ended up picking this one up, and oh my god, I'm so glad I did, because it was so good. This, usually like in a thriller, you know who got murdered, or you know, like some like little piece, so you're like trying to figure out everything about it. But this one, you didn't know who got murdered, and you don't know who did it until literally the very end. So this book left you guessing the whole entire time, and if you haven't read this one, highly, highly recommend. The next book is How to Walk Away by Catherine Sinner, and this is about Margaret. She knows that her boyfriend is going to propose to her on Valentine's Day, and on their way to dinner, her boyfriend ends up going to the airfield instead because he is being trained to be a pilot. However, she hates to go up in any type of plane, but she went ahead and said, yeah, I'll go up in the plane with you. And he ends up proposing to her while they're flying, and when they're on their way back to land, basically, their plane ends up hitting like this gust of wind, and they end up crashing, and she ends up becoming really badly burnt and becomes paralyzed. I really love this one. I love the main character, Margaret, a lot, and this book just really tugs at your heartstrings, and it really makes you think that, you know, things really do happen for a reason. And that's really all I want to say about this one, because this one is just so good. I highly recommend picking this one up if you haven't picked this one up yet. The next book that I want to talk about is Heartbreak Warfare by Heather M. Orgrone and Kate Stewart. This is about Katie. She's about to get deployed to the Middle East, and she's leaving behind her son and her husband. So while she's overseas, she really misses her family, but thankfully she has her best friend there with her. And while they're overseas, they end up becoming friends with this group of guys. And this one guy named Briggs is really persistent on trying to, you know, flirt with her or whatever, but he knows that she's married. So, but he continues to flirt with her, talk to her, whatever. So one day they're all on a mission, and their Humvee ends up getting attacked, and Briggs and Katie are captured. So they must lean on each other to survive what they're going through. So when they end up coming back home, she is really in a bad place, and the only person that can really get through to her is Briggs. So this is a military romance with a love triangle, but this love triangle is done very, very well. This book was so emotional. I just loved this book. It'll be one of those books that I always remember for a very long time. It was just so, so amazing. The next one I'll talk about is Hotshot Doc by R.S. Gray, and Bailey's parents have been killed in a accident, and she is now has custody of her younger sister, so all of her dreams basically go out the window. She wanted to be a surgeon, so now she's only a surgical assistant. And one day at work, she finds out that her surgeon is wanting to retire, so she must find another surgeon to work under. So she ends up working under Dr. Russell, and he is a complete jerk. They bump heads, but as time goes on, they end up getting into the groove of working with each other, and they start having an attraction. So this book reminded me so much of Grey's Anatomy. If you love medical dramas and with a romance, I definitely recommend picking this one up. It was really good. I really love enemies to lovers, and this was a slow burn romance as well, so we really got the buildup of their relationship, and their chemistry was spot on. So good. Highly recommend this one. And the last book that I want to talk about is The Christmas Blanket by Candy Steiner. This book is about Eliza. She decides to go home to see her family for Christmas in Vermont, and on the way to her parents' house, there's a blizzard going on, and her car spins off into the ditch, and the guy that comes to help her is actually her ex-husband. And while the roads are too bad for her to go to her parents' house, he tells her to stay in his cabin until the weather lets up. So this book was so good. I love Candy Steiner. Anything she writes, I love. And this one I liked how you're following a divorced couple and they're basically forced to be together again, or at least talk with each other again after their divorce. So this book is actually a novella, and it definitely did not feel like a novella at all. Both of the characters were really fleshed out, and you got backstories of both of them, which I really appreciate in a romance novel. But I really hope in the future that Candy ends up writing a full-length novel of these two characters, because I just love them so much. And I also think why I really like this one a lot is because I was in a huge reading slump in, I don't know, what, September, October, November, and then I picked this one up last month. Loved it, and it really sparked my interest for reading again. So I think this is another reason why I really love this book. I mean, it's a great book, but it definitely has an extra significance to it. So yeah, if you like second chance romances set in the holiday season, I highly recommend picking this one up. It was fantastic. So those are my top 10 books of 2020. Let me know in the comments what your favorite books of 2020 were, and if you've read any of these books, let me know so we can chat about them. And until then, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!